So I'd like to say a very big welcome to everyone that has joined us today. We have got so far well over 100 people. We've got about 130 people so far. And I think what's most exciting about today, we've got people from all over the world. So we have people from iTOO offices in Joburg and Cape Town and Durban and Botswana and Namibia. We have many of iTOO's brokers in the insurance industry in South Africa. We have lots of people from the art world, which is great to have some people in the art world. We have James Shepherd from Stellenbosch just joining us. And we have lots of people from overseas. So we have people from the UK, from the USA, from Europe, and all over the place. Gordon, is there anywhere else that we've got interesting people from?
So yeah, we've been joined from Botswana, from Melbourne. I think that's the furthest away that's joined us. I think it's about midnight there, so they're allowed to have a glass of wine. Some of our friends in Italy, in Germany. I think if Victor's on the line, he's joined us from Nigeria, so it's great. A really international spread of people, so thank you.
We have some people from Spain and Milan and Modena, so great to have a couple of people from Italy and Spain on board as well. So I would like to say a really big welcome to everyone. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Justin from iTOO, and I'm sitting at the moment in Johannesburg in South Africa. And I'm really lucky to be chatting to Gordon Massie, who is the good-looking gentleman in the other screen that you can see. And Gordon is the founder of a business of ours called iTOO Artinsure. He's passionate about art. He's an amazing expert when it comes to the insurance of art and all kinds of collectibles. And today we're really talking a bit about his passion for photography. And Gordon is a very passionate photographer, and he's really been one of the reasons that I've got into the love of photography and art. And I just thought it would be really interesting if Gordon shared a couple of his pictures and told us a bit about his story. So Gordon, I don't know how you want to start this, but do you want to start with a bit of an intro, and we can ask a few questions and chat a bit as we go? So Gordon, should we get going? And do you want to start with a couple of photos?
Absolutely. So maybe, Justin, if we just talk about the process first, because that's that'll contextualize it. I'm always asked what equipment I use. I think everybody's interested in photographer's equipment. And so I thought maybe I should just talk through that very quickly. One of the things I use is one of these. Can you see it, Justin?
Yep, I can see it.
So whoever messages on the comments thing to Justin the quickest on what's inside this, Justin will buy them a malt whiskey later on. And then I use a Fuji, which has got a 35mm lens on it. It's a digital camera. And then I do a lot of my surveys, my studies, using just a cell phone. And then I take this old brute out and I shoot with this brute as well, which will give the clue away to the competition because it's a film camera. So that's what I use. That's what I have here in London with me. I'm sitting in the Barbican, which is about in the middle of that map that hopefully you can see in front of you. And I found myself here for lockdown, and I decided to do a photography project within the confines of the government regulations here, which basically says that we're allowed to walk for an hour a day. And so I decided to do a photography project. I wanted to be non-intrusive and to extend my exploration of spaces and architecture and what it means in the socio-political and economic situation. It's an ongoing process. In the UK, I think we're going to be until about mid-May in the lockdown, so I'll continue to shoot these photographs. And basically what I do is I've plotted on this map that was provided to me by the Barbican. I've plotted where I can walk to within 30 minutes and walk back within 30 minutes, and I go out and I look for things to photograph that are symbolic or significant of the current time we're in. The works that I'm going to show you are, some of them won't make it through to the final exhibition, and some of them will. The titles will change, but Justin asked me whether I would be willing to come in and just share in mid-process a body of work. It's quite unusual to share in mid-process, but I'm excited to share some of the photographs with you. Great.
Thank you very much, Gordon. So I can announce the winner who guessed what was in your hand first. and that was James Shepherd. And James is a broker of ours from Marsh, based in Stellenbosch in Cape Town. He's actually from the UK, so he's really excited about listening to your talk, and it's a bit of a trip down memory lane for him. So well done, James, and I definitely owe you a whiskey or a single malt when we're allowed to see each other sometime in the near future, I hope. So Gordon, maybe before we get into it, you've described a little bit about the process. So you're walking, around on your daily walk that's allowed around London. You're taking some photographs. Where did you get this idea from? And do you want to talk about any other photographers that you perhaps get some inspiration from? Who are the photographers that you aspire to, and where have you got some of this inspiration from?
So my son asked me the other day to name my top 4 albums, and I sent him a list of 12. I'm very bad at cutting it down to a few, but I've got a list of about 8 to 10 photographers that I really admire. I admire for their intellectual input into the work that they're shooting, and how there's numerous layers in the works that they shoot, such as Alfredo Jarre, David Goldblatt, Ernest Cole, Malik Sabidi, Santu Mathekeng, Sebastião Salgado, Don McCullen, and Greg Marinovich. All of those I have books of theirs. I've followed them for years, and I love their work. Fantastic.
So Gordon, do you want to take us a bit further in your presentation, and we'll keep chatting as we go along?
Yeah, before we go further, I just want to do a quick thank you. I want to thank Susie for her help, Susie Copperthwaite, Laura for her help, Harriet and Hamish, my children, for putting up with all my photography projects, and Ilaria for having prepared this presentation for us, which she's done a beautiful job. So, great. So,
sorry, Gordon, if I could maybe ask you one question. You mentioned, maybe before we get into it, that this project is kind of halfway through and you're not sure where it's going. Do you know where this project is going to go, and do you know where it would end up as a project?
So I think this phase of the project, I will stop on the day that the lockdown is over in London. But repeat photography is a big thing of mine, Justin, as you know. And I've been thinking that I'll want to go back to some of the places I've photographed and re-photograph them in the recovery period, and maybe re-photograph them in the normality period. And maybe I'll photograph them, very different for me, but maybe I'll photograph them in color, just to distinguish them between the vast empty spaces and the isolation now, and what I anticipate in a couple of months' time will be vibrant, busy streets again.
Great, fantastic.
Great. So this photograph was on the last Sunday before we went into full lockdown. We were in a containment period here in the UK. I had gone down to visit some very good friends of mine, the Mitchells, with my children, and we'd had a lovely weekend. It was full of some anxiety, as we all had, building up to the lockdown. What does it mean? Where are we going to go? How are we going to manage it? And then when I left them on the Sunday, I got to this station, the station's in Headcorn, and I stood on the bridge and I saw this long railway line, and it was quite symbolic for me of what we were all entering into. And it was dead silent. It was a Sunday, so you would expect very few people there, but it was dead silent, and I photographed that as the first one as we were stepping into this lockdown. I also loved it aesthetically because the lines, I think the infrastructure lines are quite beautiful, and then the nature lines and the clouds that appeared. So that was that. And then I got on the train and went to London, to the Barbican, where I've mentioned I'm staying, and started my daily walks to go and find things to photograph. Quite a few of you on the line will be insurance people, I'm sure, and so you probably recognize some of these buildings. And these buildings are not taken at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning for me to make sure there's no people. I've taken these photographs at times when we would all expect there to be a lot of people. The left-hand photograph is the main entrance to Lloyd's. The middle photograph is Lime Street, with on the right-hand side the Lloyd's building, on the left-hand side the building that houses Willis. And for those who don't know it, Lime Street would normally, this time of the day, it was about 12:30, would be bustling with people and lots of suited people getting deals done, and also people getting ready to go off for lunch. And then the right-hand side is across the road from the middle ones, and on the left there is the Aon building, or the building that has Aon and a number of other companies in it, and also the building that has Aviva. And I think for me, it was the emptiness of the outside it, the lack of people, that really started to focus on my mind on what this isolation was and this solitude.
I think for all of our listeners in the insurance industry, these are some really special pictures, because if any of you have been to Lloyd's of London in this area, it's an incredible part of the city of London, and really the center of insurance in the world, in my view. And I went there as a young graduate, and I've been lucky enough to go back there once or twice during my career. And it's fascinating because you get risks from all over the world. You know, I was there when watching underwriters insure cargo planes in Russia, the chest hair of a rock star, a satellite going into space, a building in Africa. And all of these risks come together through brokers, and it's a very traditional market where it's done face-to-face in an underwriting box. So these areas that are being photographed are usually buzzing with brokers with a slipcase under their arm and coming in to try and get it placed in that middle building that you see there. So it's absolutely fascinating to see them completely empty. Gordon, is there anything that you want to share just for the insurance viewers out there about Lloyd's of London and their approach to insurance during lockdown? I think it's quite interesting, and I think we've looked at what they did, and they were a bit ahead of us in lockdown. Sure. And it's been interesting to see what they've done during lockdown.
A week before the lockdown came in, they went into a full test, and so they closed the market down, and everybody had to work from home. Some companies had already instituted that, and the close down was successful. And the following week, they closed the market and everybody was working from home. The Lloyd's electronic placing system is being used more actively now than ever before. I think some of the previous resistance to it might be fading away as a result of people having to work from home and do electronic placing. There's no doubt that it will fill up again once the lockdown's over, but they're successfully trading from home.
And Gordon, do you think that this is going to influence the future of Lloyd's? And we've certainly seen in our own market back here in South Africa, people working from home. Lloyd's has been really traditional. It's been around for about 300 years with that face-to-face interaction of doing business. Yet here they are continuing working from home. Do you think that will impact this marketplace that is Lloyd's?
Justin, I don't know specifically about Lloyd's, but I think we've all learned over the last few weeks that actually we can work from home very effectively and don't need to be commuting and congregating in expensive spaces every day. But there is a lack of the personal touch that's gone. So I think there'll be a blend of it somehow.
Great, thank you. Gordon, I know you have a fascination with structures. That Lloyd's building is a really unique building. Do you know anything about it and the history of it and any of that?
So, despite my beard and things, I'm actually quite old. When I first started in the London market, on the left-hand side was the Lloyd's building. It was, if you look at the middle photograph, it was the 1958 building, and then Richard Rogers designed this building on the right-hand side. And the market was moved into there, and the old Lloyd's has gone. And this building was one of the tallest buildings in the city at the time. I think it's just the Aviva headquarters, which was taller than it. And it was quite remarkable because all of its guts are on the outside, as you can see some of that in this photograph here. Now this Lloyd's building is dwarfed by numerous other buildings around it as things have progressed.
It really is a beautiful building and a beautiful photograph that you've taken, Gordon.
Cheers. Shall I move on?
At the moment, Gordon, you've just got 2 marriage proposals.
Just 2.
One lady likes your beard and says you look like Sean Connery. And another one is saying that you look a bit like Father Christmas. But I will questions going. I've got a comment from Matthew Day, who's a broker in London, and he says it seems so strange to see Lloyd's without the waiters at the entrance. So usually at Lloyd's, there are waiters in their traditional coats at the entrance of Lloyd's, and Matt is sharing that. And again, I think that's, for me, the beautiful thing about photography is everyone can look at a photograph and they'll take something different out of it.
Yeah.
So keep going, Gordon, and I will raise any questions as they come up.
So Justin, you said earlier that you thought this was the center of the insurance world. I think a lot of people would argue that this is the center of the insurance world, the Lamb Pub and the whole market. And I took this photograph on a Friday at 2:30 in the afternoon. Now, normally on a Friday at 2:30 in the afternoon, there would be people, and it was a nice sunny afternoon as well. There'd be people 10 deep standing outside this pub, enjoying a drink and a conversation. And as you can see, it's just completely empty. I like the photograph for a number of reasons. The structure, of course, is beautiful. The fact you can still see the Lloyd's building in the background. And rather bizarrely, the fact that all the lights are still on. There's nobody in there, and the lights are still on. So this is one of my favorite ones that I've taken during the project. And I'm sure you've stood outside there, Matt and Justin.
It's absolutely my favorite photograph, and you will see, those of you watching, that it's actually my background photograph for today. And it's such a special photograph because to me it represents so much about the insurance industry. When I was young, I was lucky enough to go to Lloyd's on a secondment, and I spent about 3 or 4 months working in the Lloyd's market. And just every day, this pub was absolutely full and heaving, and it was a great place at lunchtime and after work, where the whole market, brokers and underwriters, would be out in the pub having a pint of beer, often discussing risks, but most importantly, building relationships. And these relationships between an underwriter and a broker are really what forge and help the insurance industry to place these difficult risks and work through difficult claims. And I certainly learned a couple of lessons there, drinking a few pints at lunchtime and then trying to go back to the office into a compliance meeting or something like that. So I've really fond memories of the Lamb Pub, which is really an institution in the insurance industry in London. So beautiful photograph.
Justin, did you develop a taste for warm English bitter?
I still quite haven't got that right.
Good.
But I certainly had some good experiences in the Lamb.
Right.
We've got some other comments from Matthew as well, and he says this reminds us all to look up at the so many interesting features above the ground floor. And again, I think it's fascinating because when I went there and when it's full of people and you're looking around at the people, you don't tend to look up and notice the beautiful ceilings and all of the features above you. Yeah. So thank you, Matt. I think that's a really interesting comment, and just great to see it in lockdown empty and how there's so much more beauty that you probably didn't notice before.
Sure. I think that comment from Matt speaks to a lot about life and a lot of what people are experiencing now. The time to stop and actually look around. So thanks, Matt.
Gordon, we've got another question here from Daniel Ross, and he's saying context is clearly central to this collection. And is that typical of your photography, Gordon, the context?
Hi, Daniel. Good to hear from you. And thanks very much for the living room live concerts that you guys are putting on each night with some great classical music. You guys should check it out. It's called livingroom.com. Daniel, I think that all of my bodies of work are around a context of spaces, empty spaces, architecture, and how they reflect the socio-political situation that I'm in at the time, or that we're in at the time.
Thank you, Gordon. We've got another question here, or really a comment from Rodney Caruana. And Rodney is a broker of ours from FPM in Johannesburg. And Rodney says it reminds me of the Hollard Arms in the old days in Johannesburg in the 70s. And Hollard Insurance Company is in fact named after Hollard Street and a pub, Hollard Arms in Johannesburg. So interesting that there's another pub and a very well-known South African insurance company, you know, this broker relationship and socializing is a big part of the market.
Yeah, great. Okay, shall I crack on?
Yeah.
Cool. The furthest I can walk south east from me, it takes me to the Tower of London. Some of you may have visited this. I think Matt's office is very close to it. And for those who don't know it, it houses the crown jewels. It's famous for its beefeaters and its ravens. In the background on those two turrets, they're Tower Bridge. So it's a very scenic part of London. And these blocks that you see here, these benches, are normally all round packed with tourists, completely packed with tourists. And again, this photograph was taken midday when you expect there to be tourists. And I thought that was quite a significant moment in my walks. And then also I started to notice the pigeons, and because the pigeons are not constrained or restrained by lockdown. And the pigeons, you'll see them in a few photographs. It's almost like they started to take over London. It was almost like a Alfred Hitchcock bad movie coming back to haunt us. So then I could walk west, and if I walked at a quick pace, I could get to Leicester Square. And Leicester Square is a very busy hub of you're able to buy whatever you like, whether it's legal or illegal, big movie houses, restaurants, street performers, mobbed all year round. And this is one of the roads that leads up to the Leicester Square itself, and you could just see the stillness, the serenity. And that was quite a powerful moment for me. I then started to notice that the few people that there were around helped to describe the isolation, the lockdown, and the process we're all going through. The one on the left here is taken at St. Paul's Cathedral. Normally there'd be a big queue leading up to that large door on the left of people going in there as tourists. And there you have one guy sitting there reading his newspaper, and the pigeons congregating on him, almost looking like they're ready to take advantage of him. And on the right-hand side, it's Paternoster Square. It's where the London Stock Exchange is. The London Stock Exchange was on my mind, as most stock exchanges were on a lot of people's minds as the market collapsed. And again, this is a very busy thoroughfare. There's just one person there, and the pigeons again. And I quite accidentally, but quite lovely, I noticed when I developed these photographs that I'd caught these two pigeons on the bottom left-hand side, which are observing social distancing as they walk somewhere.
Great. Gordon, we've got a couple of questions coming in here, and mainly around a bit of context from some of your previous shows and exhibitions. Yeah. So Gordon, we've got a question here that says, it would be great to hear your philosophical link between Cairn and what the Cairn that you did in your show before and what you're currently doing. Is there any kind of link between them?
Yeah, totally. Cairn was all about structures and what those structures mean and why they were put there, what they've left behind, what they promise for the future. And in Cairn, there were some amazing empty spaces on Rose Road, in Great Zimbabwe, around Johannesburg, and some in Spain. And I think that this was a natural continuation from that, because I was now confronted with empty spaces, not necessarily empty buildings, but empty spaces, and what that means and how it reflects where we are and where we're going.
Right, beautiful. Gordon, do you want to, while we're talking about that, do you want to tell everyone a little bit about Gordon Massie documentary photography and a bit of the journey you've been on in the last year or so?
Sure. I think I sat with you, Justin, and Paolo and some others down in Plettenberg Bay at the beginning of last year, having built up a photography practice and a a passion for it. And when we all said, what do we plan for this year? I said, I'm going to have an exhibition this year. And that's what I set out to do. And thanks to the help of some people such as Susie Copperthwaite and Laura De Harder, we were able to put together a very successful exhibition in Johannesburg and a great website. And that started the process of being a professional photographer when I'm not a professional insurer.
Great. And to those of you who are listening who may want to take a look, you should have a look at Gordon's website. It's really beautiful. He's also on Instagram and on Facebook, and you really should go and have a look at his website, and you'll see some of his previous exhibitions and photographs that he's taken. So go and have a look after this. I'm sure you'll be inspired to go and have a look.
Great. Thank you. So continuing with involving people, and I think some of the people I've shared these photographs with say how the individual people in these photographs really bring out the solitude of lockdown. I started to notice people on benches, and I started to notice benches as well. There's such a proliferation of benches in London, and I'm sure there is in every major city. You never noticed them before, but suddenly I'm noticing them. I'm very partial to this particular building in the Barbican, so I've photographed it a lot. I love the architecture. And these circular communal benches were very poignant for me at the time because they're meant for communion as opposed to anything solitary or being empty. So I continued to photograph benches. The photograph on the left-hand side, you can't see it at this level of resolution, but there's one woman sitting at the far end on a cell phone in that whole area. And as you can see from the sky, it's a beautiful March day in London, and normally this place would be packed. There's water that runs past it, there's a musical school, it would be packed, and it isn't. Then I photographed the right-hand side. It's a park near where my apartment is. And what was poignant for me was that the benches are available, but nobody's sitting on them. The children's equipment there has all got barrier tape around it to prevent children from being able to play on it as part of this lockdown strategy. I then went back there 5 days ago, and the trees are now full of leaves, and they're beautifully full. And now the benches are all covered in barrier tape, as though now is a time to prevent people from using a bench in the middle of the isolation. So it's just interesting for me, the practices that people are putting in place to stop communion.
Great. Gordon, I've got another question for you. And Gordon, this is from Gail, Gail Walters. So great to have you listening in, Gail. And she says, is there a sub-theme of nature moving back into the vacuum, and perhaps the beauty of that? Is there anything on that in your photography or in the theme?
Hi, Gail. Nice to have you join us. So, Gail, I think that I didn't overtly go out to find nature moving back in, but I think that we're all, in all the different cities, and everybody that's here today from all the different cities are experiencing some form of clarity in the air, lowering of pollution, and maybe nature taking something back. This building, I photographed it. It's in Clerkenwell in the Finsbury estate. There's 150 apartments in there. Behind me, there's a university. Behind me to my left, there's another building, a 25-story building. I think it's got 180 apartments in it. There's a lot of apartment buildings around there, and they are all ranging from 4 bedrooms down to bedsits. So it's dense living. And what struck me as I walked around there were the lack of people on the road. I could almost believe that everybody had left London, but actually these buildings were still full of people. And instead of empty spaces, how I did before, this is now empty spaces around these dwellings, and these dwellings are still being used intensively. And of course, there's a lot of stories about the difficulty of living in high density living during the isolation. So it was very poignant for me. the apartment I am is on the horizon there, and I'm able to walk in a direct line and walk across this bridge. It's 350-meter span bridge. It's called the Millennium Bridge. And I arrive at my cathedral, which is the Tate Modern, which would be behind me as you look at this photograph. And it faces St. Paul's. And I walked across it often. And then one morning I walked across and a street artist had been out. And it was the first bit of street art that I saw with regards to the lockdown, with regards to coronavirus. And it was a very positive message. And this street artist had written that. And had also written one at the steps of St. Paul's, but a different message. It was very positive, and I photographed it. As you can see, there was nobody on the bridge. For those of you who go to the Tate Modern, you'll know this bridge is a very popular bridge. It's full of tourists, full of commuters. And so I photographed it, and 2 days later I went back and the message had gone. And that got me thinking about the ephemeral, the transient nature of things, and how this positive message, because it was street art or graffiti, had just been removed. And now it'll only be remembered by the few people such as myself who recorded it.
Really beautiful snapshots, and I don't think you'd see that photo just like that anytime again. So it's really incredible that you captured it, Gordon. And Gordon, did you notice, interestingly, Sarah Barrett has pointed out that there's a spelling mistake in tomorrow with 2 M's. Did you notice?
Yes. Hi, Sarah. Good of you to join us. Interestingly enough, when I posted this, part of my practice is as I'm studying these subjects, I'll put them on my Instagram account, and I put on there artist unknown, hoping I'd get some feedback as to who the street artist was. And somebody wrote back to me and said they think it's Tom Morrow because of the spelling mistake. So
that's fascinating, and I hadn't picked that up. Got a quote from David Joseph here to say we'll remember that message too. And I think it really is a really appropriate message for this time, particularly going into lockdown, that you have to just start somewhere with tomorrow. So really appropriate quote. Great that you captured it.
Great. Okay. So this was one of my favorite moments during this lockdown, during these walks. And this is on the north bank of the Thames. It's on the embankment, and it's next to Cleopatra's Needle. And adjacent to Cleopatra's Needle, there are 2 sphinxes. They are massive, and they are cast bronze. They're huge. They dominate. Cleopatra's Needle dominates as well. And I'd gone there to try and find it just because I'm very interested in why an ancient Egyptian artifact would be on the banks of the Thames, and all this talks about repatriation, etc. But when I got there, I noticed that there were these 7 books at the feet of the Sphinx, and there was nobody around. And this again is midday on a weekday, so this pavement, this road would be chock-a-block. And there was nobody around for me to ask why these books were there. And interesting enough, that morning, because it's London, there had been some heavy rain. And these books were not damaged by water. They'd been placed there for some reason. And I will never know why they were there. My immediate assumption was that they were there for sale because I'd become accustomed to seeing people sell books to raise money. When I put forward that idea, I think it was to my daughter, she said she'd never heard of anybody doing it in London. And then I went back a couple of days later and there was no books there. And I walked past there fairly often and there's been no return of books. So it was just an interesting, ephemeral, transient moment for me as well. I also picked up something in the photograph that hopefully you can see as I point it out to you. And that is, look at the Thames water. Look how glassy it is. It's absolutely still. All I see moving on it nowadays is this police barge every now and again. And that water, which is normally really choppy, is so often just absolutely still like this.
Gordon, we've got lots of compliments for this photo. I mean, it really is a special photograph. And a few questions again on the type of camera. So which camera did you shoot this photograph? Is it the same as all of them?
It was with this one, which is a Fujifilm with a 35mm prime lens.
And do you use a tripod for this sort of photograph?
No, you know, Justin, I can't walk around with a camera bag and a tripod and some steps, and we're supposed to be doing an hour's exercise. I do see some photographers around who've got big kit bags and things, but I just don't think it's appropriate for me to be doing that. This is about capturing a moment during an hour's walk.
And then, Gordon, I've got a picture about the bronzes. I mean, do you know when or where they were cast, and anything else about the history of these bronzes that you photographed?
I do. I researched them. I haven't got all the details in my head. I've got them in a notebook, but they were cast in the UK in the 1800s. The Cleopatra's Needle had been gifted to the UK by an Egyptian leader as a thank you for their activities during the Napoleonic Wars against Napoleon, which is all quite bizarre. And they stayed in Egypt for a long time. I want to say 80 years, and eventually they were brought to the UK. And when the Cleopatra's Needle was put up, these bronzes were cast as well to accompany it. So they were cast in the UK. There is a similar needle in Paris and in New York as well.
Beautiful photograph, Gordon. It's going to be very hard for you to keep up with this standard. So let's see what else you have to share with us. But Gordon, I know this is a really interesting photograph, and I know that you've got some interesting thoughts on the different headlines of the newspapers here. So yeah. It's really interesting if you explain that process around newspaper headlines at the station.
So this is part of the overall project, but it's become a sub part in its own right. This is Moorgate Tube Station. It is, for those of you who don't know, it's a short walk from the Bank of England. It's a heavily utilised commuter station. I read somewhere that there's over 20 million passenger journeys through it a year. So however you contextualize it, there's a lot of people that are flowing through there, and it's been kept open as one of the essential tube stations. A lot of the tube stations have been closed for essential workers to be able to get to whatever they need to around here. So first of all, it was quite logical for me to photograph some transport hubs, some transport areas, because of isolation and the impact on them. And when I went to Moorgate, which I walk past every day on my walk, when I went there, I started to look at the Evening Standard headlines. And if you look at the two boards, left and the right, they're the Evening Standard headlines, and next to the steps, that's the Evening Standard. And the Evening Standard is now a free newspaper, and it's, as the name says, it's an evening newspaper. And what got me was the headlines that the Evening Standard always come up with in order to get somebody to take their newspaper. And I thought, surely just saying there's a pandemic would be enough for people to buy. You know, it's a pretty scary thing, but they keep on coming up daily. I'll go there this evening and photograph it. They keep on coming up with more and more dramatic headlines, and I just find it really interesting. So I have photographed the Evening Standard headlines here, or at Bank Station, or at St Paul's Station every evening, and this will become a story. We'll be able to read these headlines somehow and read the story of a lockdown in London through these headlines. The idea isn't entirely mine, it's entirely new. I think you will have all seen somebody like Alfredo Jarre, who took the front cover of Newsweek, and every Newsweek that was produced throughout the Rwandan genocide, he took the front cover and then he published it just to see what the world was saying during the Rwandan genocide. Needless to say, Newsweek didn't even mention it. So anyway, it's just interesting for me to see the dramatic headlines they come up with. When Boris Johnson was falling ill, there was some very dramatic ones. And this one talks on the left-hand side about there being a £1.9 billion surge in profits in March because people are stockpiling. And the one on the right is a government minister asking people to stop stockpiling. And then just down the road from there, I think I sent you a copy, Justin. I photographed a new piece of graffiti that's come up with Boris Johnson. And it's just all these words that are being used around the coronavirus that I'm finding quite interesting.
So Gordon, on graffiti, I know that you managed to get some Banksy works, and I think most people listening would probably have heard of Banksy. He's really one of my favorite artists. It would be great if you shared a couple of insights into some of his work and maybe some of the works that you photographed while you're in London.
Sure. I haven't put any Banksy, any street art apart from the St. Paul's one into this presentation yet. I'm still working on the concept around them and how they fit in. I would say that there's half a dozen Banksys within my walking area for this project, but they're all quite dated and they are in various conditions, including one has been taken away now. The wall has been carved out and it's been taken away somewhere. And some are behind perspex and others are fading away. But Banksy is a legend in the world and they're very poignant works. I then found one in the northeast extreme from where I'm allowed to walk in a place called Shoreditch. I found a piece of graffiti. It's by a street artist called Pegasus. And I'll share that on, in fact, I think I shared it on my Instagram account. So if you want to go there and have a look, and it's actually Boris Johnson, and he's in that, you know, we want you type pose from the Second World War. And the original poster said, we want you not to panic buy. And he's crossed out some of the words, and it's Boris Johnson saying, we want you to panic. And it was just quite a powerful comment by Pegasus at the time. I'm sure, guys, that there will be more and more street art that pops up in all cities around this pandemic.
Gordon, we've got a couple of questions here. So we've got a question here from James, who says one aspect photos miss are the sounds and smells. Do you find it spooky or more back to nature? What is your experience in the sound and smells during lockdown in London?
Thanks, James. So I shot a video on Lime Street, and I'm not a videographer. I just wanted to capture the sound, and I wanted to walk through it. So I shot a video in Lime Street and in Leadenhall Market, and it's pretty silent. It's very silent. It is as eerie as some of these photographs look, I think. As for the smells, I haven't really noticed any difference apart from that reduction in pollution that I mentioned earlier on.
Great stuff. Do you want to go on to the next?
Yeah, another station, Charing Cross Station. There's not that many layers to this photograph. It's a very busy station normally, and it's obviously empty. I found it quite interesting, the poster at the front there about the pandemic, and then the guy from Barclays Bank at the top left-hand side still trying to sell loans to people or bank accounts to people in the station. That's a continuing video there, ad.
Gordon, we have a question here to say that this would make such a beautiful book. Do you have any plans to put something like this collection into a book?
Can I guess who asked that question?
You can.
Get a whiskey if I get it right.
Yes, you can.
Does her name begin with an L?
Yes, correct.
Hello, Laura.
No, this is a different L.
Oh, okay.
Lucy McGarry.
Hello, Lucy. So, Lucy, there's been some talk about a book on the Cairn project with Laura. and with Susie. And I think that what I would really like these photographs one day is for somebody to refer to them when they're writing a piece about the pandemic, looking back in history. I'd really like them to be poignant works that are used. And I think for that to happen, for them to be in a book, will be fantastic. So thank you.
Laura says you know her very well, Gordon.
Cool. Great.
This looks like an interesting photograph. So why don't you tell us a bit about this?
Sure. This is a study. This one is actually shot with my cell phone. I saw it. I shot it, and then I went back again with my other cameras and shot it. But this is the study. This is the Brunswick Centre. It's in Bloomsbury. And it's a beautiful modernist building that I really like. I go there to try and photograph it when I can. And I went there that day, and I started to see the layers that were going on here. The Curzon Cinema, which is an art cinema. It's a little bit like you have in Joburg, the Cinema Nouveau. And it's an art cinema, it's a beautiful cinema. And the last film that they had shown before lockdown was Parasite. And Parasite was the film that won the Oscars in February, at the time that Trump was criticizing, why did a South Korean film win this? And Parasite is about people who take over somebody's home and who are basically uninvited lodgers in somebody's very glamorous home. And it was quite interesting because at the time all this happened, South Korea were coming to terms with coronavirus and bringing out strategies to deal with it, which have been some of the best in the world. So all of this in my mind started to merge. And then I read the sign. So normally on the sign underneath Curzon there, they would say, you know, the next film was Parasite and the Times or whatever. It was just this message from the Curzon to everybody. And I found that quite powerful.
Right, really beautiful.
Great. And then, of course, I've photographed a lot of empty roads. I'm not quite sure where the empty roads are going as part of this project. But the one on the left runs from where I live up towards Islington. And it's normally an artery and just full of traffic. And then you've got these bicycles on the bottom right hand side of it, all of these Boris bikes that were brought in, or whatever we call them nowadays. And it was just the solitude, the stillness that got me there. The one on the right is London Wall. This road runs along where one of the original London walls was. And again, it's a financial district. It's normally very congested. For you insurance people, just on the left-hand side down that road, it's the Chartered Insurance Institute, which is probably the centre to have set a lot of your exams. And it was just a very still moment, and so I photographed it. And then the last photograph that I've put into this current phase of the project and the process is this. I loved the scene for its minimalism. And then its poignancy. I think the security camera at the top right-hand side speaks a lot about the vigilance that's going on in London, and then, or around the world, sorry. And then these bike racks, and these empty bike racks in the middle of a day, and the chains that have been left on the bike racks, almost as though they're waiting for somebody to come back for them. So it's a very interesting structure for me. So when the lockdown started, I collect socks, art socks, loud socks, and I started to photograph myself in some of these different places, or those socks, and put it on my Instagram story every night, together with a piece of music. And the piece of music is always an uplifting song, a song that I think people will smile at, roll their eyes at, maybe have a little dance to. And it's become quite a thing. and I wouldn't say it's viral, but it's very well supported. And every day I get comments and smiles and dances, and it's become a positive part of the lockdown photography project. It's in color, it's in some of the places I've gone to, and it's just been quite a joyful thing to do. So I'm loving it. It'll stop as well when lockdown ends, and I think we'll probably make a playlist from it and then draw a line under it. But it's been a lot of fun, and it just shows again to everybody that there's lots of ways you can be creative and fun and bring some happiness. So do you want to talk about the competition?
Yeah, so let's talk about the competition. Are you going to show us the photograph that people can win? Gordon, have you got that there with you?
There.
Okay, so to everyone, we're going to launch a competition where you can actually win this photograph of Gordon's. So I thought, Gordon, it might be interesting for you just to tell people quickly about this photograph, and then I'll explain the rules about the competition.
Sure. So it has nothing to do with the body of work I've just shown you now, because the body of work I've just shown isn't published or editioned yet. But this is one of my favorite shots taken in Johannesburg, in Newtown. The vehicle is an Opel. It's not my vehicle. It just happened to be there. I love the street art that's across the road, that there's one person in it, and the lines of the bridge that are running away and the lights on it. And it's been one of my favorite images I took. And I asked Susie to help me to decide on a work that would be great for this competition, and she chose this, so I'm delighted.
So beautiful photograph, and we'd like to offer it as a competition. So Gordon has very kindly donated that photograph to iTOO for the competition. So we have agreed that iTOO will donate the equivalent amount or the value of the photograph to the Solidarity Fund. So thank you very much for that, Gordon. You can actually buy Gordon's photograph. So if you do want to have a look at his website, Gordon Massie, and you can buy his photographs. They sell for 7,500 Rand. So this is the value of this photograph, just to give you an idea. And we'd like to give it away in a competition. So to talk a little bit about the competition, I'm sure that many of you have been inspired by looking at Gordon's photographs during lockdown. And I also think that you might have been inspired by his sock idea that he's had, showing his socks with a tune of music and some of his favorite songs and artists as a good way just to remember the lockdown. So we'd like to launch a competition for everyone. So what we'd like you to do is go during lockdown over the next 2 weeks. We're going to give everyone 2 weeks, so we've got a bit of time, which should work out really well, because we're going to have another week in lockdown, and we're going to have a week after that as we're starting to come out of lockdown. And we think that this will be a really good time to inspire some of you to become your own expert photographers. And we'd like you to take some pictures, and we'd love you to share them with us. So if you could use your cell phone, a camera, any equipment that you have over the next 2 weeks, and try and take your best photograph that represents something for you around lockdown. But we'd like to add to that a little bit as well. And we'd like you to choose your favorite song or your favorite artist. And when you send us the photograph, put in the name of the song and the artist, and send that to us with the photograph. You will get extra points if you can link your photograph to the title or the name of the song or the words of the song, and send us the photographs. Please could I ask you to tag and follow Gordon Massie Documentary Photography, and that can be on Instagram or Facebook. And if you can tag or follow any one of the iTOO Special Risks or iTOO Artinsure social media pages, tag or follow us with the hashtag #ExpertPhoto. So just to recap, take a photo in the next two weeks that reminds you of lockdown or documents a phase in lockdown. Put in the name of your favorite song and the artist. Follow and tag Gordon Massie Documentary Photography and one of the iTOO social media pages, and use the hashtag #ExpertPhoto. We will then collect all of the photos. We will collect all of the songs. I'm sure we will put them into a playlist and do something cool with that. And then after 2 weeks, we will have a panel of judges that will judge the best photograph. And the best photograph will be judged on the quality of the photograph. It will be judged on the meaning link with the song, and it will be judged on how it kind of documents a process in lockdown, or in South Africa, or in anywhere in the world where you may be coming out of a lockdown. If you want to be creative and have a bit of fun, feel free to put some colorful socks in the photograph, and we may consider that to give you some extra points. But really just take a photograph of lockdown, hashtag expert photo, and tag and follow us in social media. And in 2 weeks' time, we will announce the winner, and the winner will win an edition of this really, really beautiful photograph. So thank you very much for that, Gordon. And I really do hope that this inspires some people to go out and become expert photographers. If there's one thing at iTOO that we want to be famous for, and that's being experts in what we do. And I'm certainly inspired when I look at someone like Gordon, who is an Artinsure really for us, but he's an absolute expert in what he does, because he's so deeply passionate about art and collectibles and photography, and that really is what we want to represent in all of iTOO in the lines of business that we insure. So we really do hope that we inspire you to become expert photographers, and that we have some fun on social media, and we've got a really beautiful prize to give away. I'd like to end off by saying, Gordon, thank you very much. You truly have been an unbelievable person to work with. You've been an inspiration to many of us in the art world, and I think this series of photographs that you've taken is going to continue to inspire many, many people. So well done, and thank you very much for sharing some of your time and these beautiful photographs with us.
Thanks for the opportunity, Justin. It's been a lot of fun.
So that really brings to the end the formal conclusions. So if you'd like to leave now, you're welcome to do so. If you'd like to hang around and chat, Gordon and I will be online for a bit, and you're welcome to ask some questions. You're welcome to turn on your microphone and shout a hello or a well done to Gordon, and we'll be online a bit as some of you leave, and have a drink and really enjoy the weekend.